allowing us to present the Global Fund to you. As Renuka often says, we're going to give you the long and the short of the Global Fund. You've heard a lot about the Global Fund. It's been referred to many times during this meeting. But for those of you who aren't fully aware of what this fund has achieved in the 10 years that it's been in existence, we have a video for you, which we hope is going to inspire you. And once you've seen that, Renuka is going to talk to you a little bit about what's happening in the Global Fund today, and then I'm going to try and cajole more of you into supporting the fund. So let's start with the video.
Let me just take a moment and just stop and think. 10 years in. $7.7 million people are alive because of the Global Fund.
But in 2000 and 2001, the rich countries were just letting everybody die.
We were fighting the equivalent of a civil war, but one without guns. The fact that people could buy life made it very, very painful.
That it was an accident of geography, of longitude and latitude. Where you were born decided whether you would live or die.
AIDS, of course, was increasing. Tuberculosis was not dealt with, and malaria was a scourge that was there, and very little was being done.
When I was president, and for the years before, there was a sharp global divide between the countries and citizens who could afford medicine and those who couldn't.
The world had no group that could figure out how to stop the AIDS emergency, and yet it felt like the only way we could get all the resources together to help the people, particularly in Africa, who are suffering from these terrible diseases.
Action!
I got HIV when I was barely 18. I started treatment when I was 30 years old. I'm now 40 years old, and I hope to live maybe another 30 or 40 years.
If people get out on the street, if they march, if they get organized and get busy, they can accomplish amazing things. Things don't have to be as they are. The world is more malleable than you think. You can kick it into shape, you can kiss it into shape.
The main thing was to have people realize the centrality of health in human development, and therefore in any nation's development.
The Global Fund was the institution that changed that policy and changed the direction of the epidemic.
The Global Fund is about the only time I can remember as a political leader where you set something up that was supposed to have a dramatic impact and actually had a dramatic impact.
What the Global Fund meant when it was introduced, it meant hope. We were able to put so many people on treatment, and we were able to avert so many deaths. What looked quite impossible then, early 1999, 2000, became a possibility.
The Global Fund brought countries together, corporations together. It brought societies the resources to deal with a very difficult epidemic.
We can be proud wherever the world is able to work together in such a way that we overcome misery and improve people's opportunities in life.
Happy birthday, Global Fund. 10 years on. Much to do, but much you have done.
So I'll keep my remarks short. I'll leave the long ones for Brian. So after 10 years of existence, the Global Fund is now on a transformation path. They've hired Gabriel Jaramillo, who some of us had the opportunity of meeting yesterday. And what Gabriel is really doing is defining forward, which is the theme of the GBC conference as well. And he really is bringing a private sector perspective into transforming the fund and managing for the future. If I have to distill his debrief to a few of us, where he spent an hour, he really focused on three main areas. Gabriel, by the way, for those who are not aware, has tremendous financial fluency, has a record of turning around organizations, and is already making an impact on the Global Fund. He started off with back to basics. First question, what is the mission of the fund? And clearly defined that as being the best grant-making organization in the world. Anything else, he says, we have to take that off and focus on being that mission, fulfilling that mission. Point number two, again, very familiar to us in the private sector, who first and then what. So he really wants to reorganize based on the mission, having the right people for the right roles. You may have read in more recent press releases that there's been a 22% of workforce reduction at the Global Fund, but what Gabriel is really doing is realigning people to the mission, and that's already showing a lot of good success, because he's managed to hire two incredible personalities for both communication and risk management in the short time that he's been at the fund. The third point that the message was prioritize and act. In the short term that he's been in charge of as the general manager of the fund, he's forced the team to identify 20 countries that really represent 70% of the global burden of disease in HIV, TB, and malaria. And he's forcing strategies and working teams to look at what's common and what's different. So much so, from a very negative situation a few months ago, he's managed to now make an announcement that the fund has $1.6 billion at disposal to be spent in programs where there is a need. So that's already talking about Gabriel's impact. But what I've personally found very refreshing yesterday was he wasn't giving a call to the private sector, the usual call, we need more money. He was really saying, we need your competencies and skills. And as John spoke about earlier this morning, he's really issuing a call for 25 positions from the private sector to be deployed, to be seconded to the Global Fund for 6 months to a year, and across several areas, whether that's finance, whether that's procurement, supply chain, just sales even. And I thought that was a very refreshing call. So in my view, I think this is a fantastic time for greater private sector engagement. We already have many companies on board, and I would urge for many more to join in, because this is a really interesting moment. And as Brian would say, we need more. Over to you, Brian.
Thanks, Renuka. So it's an extraordinary partnership. It's committed $22 billion out into the developing world. 150 of the poorest countries around the world are now getting the money that they need to implement the programs. What I want to do is just focus a little bit on the private sector involvement, because it is a partnership, and it's up to us to make sure that the private sector is a big piece of that partnership. And these are various of the companies that are already partners. And I'm going to start in the top left-hand corner of that slide. These are companies and organizations that have given money to the Global Fund from the private sector. The biggest of those is Product Red, an extraordinary initiative which is a cause-related marketing. Lots of companies involved with Product Red. They've given over $150 million to the Global Fund, and there's more coming in all the time. Deborah Dugan, I'm not sure if she's in the audience, but she's the CEO of Product Red and is driving that thing forwards at a fast pace. Then there's Chevron, which has made a quite extraordinary contribution of a total of $55 million already to the Global Fund it really is exceptional, and I think we all should recognize Chevron for what they've done. And then there are other companies there, and particularly the next level, Takeda, Access, Anglo-American. These are companies that have all pledged to give $1 million a year for 3 years. And we're trying to get many more companies to come in at that level. I would like to see the private sector being one of the top 10 donors to the Global Fund. We occupy one of 10 donor seats. And in order to justify our presence in that seat, we need to be one of the top 10 donors. If we could get 200 companies to all commit at this level, $1 million a year for 3 years, we would be there. We'd be probably even the 5th or 6th biggest donor to the fund. So that certainly is one of the aspirations where I would like to get to. But donation of money is not the only way. There are lots of other ways. Down in the bottom left corner, we've got governance and advocacy. GBC Health is there. The Friends of the Fund, only one of them, or two of them are mentioned here, but there's also Friends of the Fund of Japan, Friends of the Fund Africa, Friends of the Fund Europe. They're all doing fantastic work for the fund. Of course, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on its own is quite extraordinary in terms of their contribution. They fill a private foundation seat. They recently announced a contribution of $750 million to the Global Fund over the next 5 years, an extraordinary contribution. We work very closely with them as part of the private sector piece of the fund. On the right-hand slide, you've got the people involved with the work of the fund. We've got grant implementers there, Shell Foundation, SAB Miller, all of those on your slide there. I particularly want to highlight AngloGold Ashanti, which is administering a Global Fund grant for $140 million fighting malaria in Ghana. They're taking the business expertise that they have applied around their mining operations, and they're now extending it into big chunks of the country, way beyond the mine. I think that grant is going to be one of the most successful partnerships that the fund has with the private sector. So we're going to watch it very carefully over the next 5 years as they implement it. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, 3 other companies that are involved with pro bono goods and services. And I must tell you, that little quadrant is looking a little bit empty. I'd like to see a lot more companies involved there. Standard Bank, Coca-Cola, Marathon Oil have all brought their business expertise to the fund. Coca-Cola, for example, helped with the distribution of medicines in Tanzania. Standard Bank is helping with 4 countries in Africa, the principal recipients, and helping them with financial management. So those are contributions that companies can make. The last piece of what I want to talk about is our little group, which we call the Private Sector Delegation Advisory Group. There are 16 companies on this slide here who are all very closely involved with the governance of the fund. They come to the board meetings, they find out what is going on, and are part and parcel of everything we do with the fund. We want more companies in this private sector advisory group. And so if you don't see your logo there on that page, all you have to do is straight after this session, you go and find Anna Thompson-Key, or you find Aisha Taylor, and you ask them how you sign up to become part of this private sector advisory group and be part of making this partnership really work for the Global Fund. I hope you're inspired to really make something of it. So thanks very much for listening.